Welcome to the Law School Playbook. Today's topic is self-reflection. Why should you engage in self-reflection in law school? You didn't do it at undergrad and you were still successful. It's really important to engage in self-reflection in law school in order to become a self-regulated learner. A self-regulated learner is someone who consciously and objectively evaluates their learning on an ongoing basis. And that means you think about your thinking. You engage in what we call metacognition. Students who become self-regulated learners have a growth mindset. They think, well, I may not have mastered this lawyering skill yet or this study skill yet, but I can. And over time, eventually I'll get there. Science agrees with that student. There is a concept called neuroplasticity, which means that our brains are wired for change. So if you stay after it and keep reflecting and thinking about what you did right, what you did wrong, what your strengths and weaknesses are, you will certainly improve as a law student. So how can you do that in terms of class, having class be the anchor? You have to think critically and have an opinion about your learning. So here are some sample reflection questions. What did you find interesting about class? Did you have any life experiences that related to the topic being discussed that day? What did you agree with and why? I have a few students who are police officers. Certainly they have a context for evaluating some of the material that we cover in courses like torts and criminal law. And even if you don't have a background that's that specific, you come to law school with life experiences that you can use to evaluate the course material and to gauge your learning. So what did you disagree with? Why? Why do you think you're covering this topic? What's the end game? How might it relate to what you'll do as a lawyer? I think that question is something that students often fail to think about in law school. They focus what's right in front of us, like many of us do, in terms of, okay, I need to get this done for class. But really, everything you do for class should be done with an eye toward what you'll do on the final exam, on the bar exam, and then ultimately as a lawyer. So ask yourself, was your before class work adequate? What worked? What didn't? Was it a waste of time? What will you change? Did you entirely miss an issue? Did you have a brief that was very detailed when it came to the facts, but it didn't really help you in class? Were you unable to follow the discussion? These are things that you should think about and then try and figure out what worked, what didn't, and what you'll change for next time. Because just putting your head down and doing the same thing time and again is not going to lead to growth and change. So think about what happened during. Taking notes in law school is quite different than taking notes in undergrad because the Socratic method of teaching is used, particularly in first-year courses. And that, if you're not familiar with it, is the process where professor goes back and forth with students asking them questions to try and elicit information, to move the dialogue, to have students learn legal concepts. So it's hard sometimes to take notes with the Socratic method because sometimes a professor will ask a student a question and the student will give a wrong answer and you don't know until after the student is giving the answer and after the professor responds that the answer that you just wrote down was incorrect, right? So obviously this is a bit of trial and error in the beginning, certainly, but it's something that warrants some thought on your part. So what did you think? Were you a court reporter who was writing everything down, or did you hardly write down anything so you were able to follow the discussion, but 3 weeks from now you wouldn't be able to recreate it in any meaningful way or pull out the pieces from the discussion that you really need to? Did the professor use hypotheticals? A case that you're reading may have a certain factual scenario and you will look together as a class how the law applied to that. But then what professors do is frankly play with the material. They say, what if this fact changed? What if we had an entirely different scenario where this occurred? How would the law work then? Those hypotheticals are potential exam questions. Those are showing you how your professor believes that the law interacts with facts, right? Or knows how law interacts with facts. And so you want to write hypotheticals down. That's often a problem I see with student notes is that, well, that doesn't relate to the case, so I didn't need to write that down. They are extremely helpful. Write them down. Hopefully you'll observe the differences between law school and undergrad and realize, okay, I need to adopt a different method of note-taking or tweak my current method to go along with the way we learn in law school. So you may decide as a result that you want to switch your note-taking method that you used in undergrad. So many students come to me and they say, okay, I'm trying to write things down, but I can't keep up. It's a form of multitasking, which we know is not effective. So do you have any recommendations? Many students, some of whom wrote in undergrad, decide that typing notes is better. There's a whole body of research that shows that handwriting notes assists with retention. However, I am not of the mind that there's one right way to do things. As cliche as it is, I think you have to figure out what works for you. There are lots of note-taking apps available. OneNote, Evernote are popular ones. Many students discover those for the first time in law school. So in the beginning, it's trial and error. So a self-regulated learner will ask, okay, so what will I do for my next class? And you don't want to be changing it up every class, but try different things, from week to week and see what works for you. Give it a few days. If it's a disaster, then you'll move on to something else. And if it doesn't go well and you're not able to adapt to that note-taking method, you could always confer with a colleague, with the professors, ask a fellow student, can I see your notes? Can we share? Because I'm trying out this new technique. So the information is not lost, lest you move on and try and come back to it 2 months later. So definitely engage in some trial and error during class, particularly when you're a 1L just starting out. You'll be glad that you did. What do you do after class if you want to reflect on your learning? A lot of students sort of skip this step and, they take their notes and they move on. Law school is a really busy time and it's understandable, but there is great value in distilling the information presented, determining what is relevant and necessary to remember. Correct what you got wrong or what another student got wrong. Students often spend an inordinate amount of time preparing for class, particularly in the beginning, out of fear they're going to be called on, right? And under the Socratic method, I still remember it from when I went to law school. It is unnerving to think that you're going to be on the spot like that. But I want you to consider that the time investment you make doing pre-class preparation is when you have the least amount of information, right? You're not really sure. This case law reading thing is new to you. You're not sure, even if you understand the case, if that's the issue. If there's more than one issue, maybe you focus on an issue that the professor isn't going to focus on. You certainly don't have the hypotheticals that the professor's going to introduce in class. Whereas after the fact, you not only have your preparation, but you have class. And so if you engage in this process of distilling the information down, figuring out what you got right, what you got wrong, what's necessary to remember, you are operating from the place of having the most information. And that process of refining and engaging with the material after class is something that's often skipped. And when you consider the fact that it's the time that you're most knowledgeable, it really is a mistake to skip that part. So try and engage in this after class work. Identify where you are unclear. What questions do you have? If you're unclear on a concept and think you're going to go back to it 3 weeks later, a month later, 2 months later, you likely won't. There's a lot of information. Law school is very fast-paced. At the very least, make a note that this is something you're not sure about because you want to be sure to get clarification before moving on. And your notes eventually are going to be used in a course summary, and that could be an outline, that could be a mind map. That is going to be your study tool for exams. Unlike undergrad, there becomes a point in law school where it makes no sense for you to go back to the casebook unless it's for a very discrete issue What you end up relying on are your notes that you turn into a study document. So what does that mean? If your notes are incorrect, if your notes are not strong, if your notes don't include hypotheticals, then you by definition have a weak study tool, right? Doing this work and engaging in this self-reflection is critical. You can do this. It just takes practice. Just be kind to yourself along the way, and just know nobody nails it out of the gate. Everybody has to do a little bit of trial to figure out what works for them. So I wish you the best of luck, and as always, I'll be rooting for you. You can do it.